Alright, so now to continue the story thus far, part 2. Now, before we begin, I want to talk to you a little bit about the players that are part of this campaign. Obviously, you already know Z, and you already know Snarg, and you already know Guido. Or if you don't, then I'll talk about them in brief when we get to their section. That's later. Right now we're going to talk about the forum campaign, which most people don't hear of as much because I haven't been doing a video summarizing their events, and it's all been consigned to the forum. But they've been doing stuff, and they are part of canon. You know, they are affecting the world, and it is affecting the way the story is progressing, so that is relevant. They're just moving a little slowly, so we're still trying to get the timeline synced up. And there's this guy named Zeiss, and he's really, really evil. Like, I mean, he shows up, and there's this puppy, and this puppy's just looking up at him with these little cute eyes, and he looks down and he says, "I'm not going to pet you, little puppy." I don't even get how he can do that. But let's start with the party members who are no longer a part of the party, because all of these characters have been what we refer to as NPC'd. In other words, they still exist, with one exception. They're still alive, they just aren't played by anyone anymore. They have been NPC'd, it makes sense. So let's start with Relin of Mechatork. Now, anybody who's actually been following the campaign thus far knows that in our most recent live episode, he actually was in the adventure. He was the grand champion of the Danby's Arena. He was a gnome black mage who joined the party all the way back at Al Irat and ended up bowing out of the party to go seek his own fortunes elsewhere. The party actually had a decision point where they were like, you know, we could go to the Colosseum, or we could head to this Order town and try to work with the Order. And I think most of the party members agree that working with the Order was something they regret, given the way that turned out. But nevertheless, Relin decided to go to Danby's as well to start this whole new thing. It was this whole arena blood sport, brand new idea, and turned out to be really, really good at it. Now, as has been revealed since then, the man is a fake, but he wasn't always a fake. He was addicted to a substance called Lace-Lice, which I will detail in full information in one of my lore dumps, but suffice it to say, it makes you temporarily a better mage while making you a worse mage long-term, and you can overuse it to the point where you literally lose the ability to cast magic. Guess what he did? So he completely overdosed on Lace-Lice in order to win the first tournament, and has been riding that success ever since, until he was finally usurped by Snark, actually. So that's him. There was a troll individual named Ashakel. Now, this troll was actually, he has no clan name, if you'll notice, I mentioned there. He was actually raised by several Ulthoi who found him as a child. He was a barbarian, had some issues fitting in with society, had some, there were some ways in which his character arc was going to go. Unfortunately, those ways have kind of terminated. He is the one person on this list who is dead. He was taking care. He had when he'd become NPC'd, he was taking care of a dwarf named Bartholomew of Ironforge, and this dwarf was a pretty decent fellow, all things considered. And it was a good pairing. The dwarf was kind of innocent and naive, but otherwise very knowledgeable. I just realized I didn't play on that. I didn't play on this either. Whoops. There. Let's hit play on everything. He was pretty knowledgeable, and he had some political connections and some money, and therefore could go off and do his archaeology career, which he wanted to do. And Ashakel could defend him, act as his bodyguard, and get to see lots of experience and lots of new things. It was a mutual thing, and the two of them were in a city that was at ground zero when two airships destructed overhead. So both of them have been literally atomized. I didn't do that out of any sense of meanness or, mean-spiritedness or anything like that. That was deliberately done to kind of get across a point of just how terrible that incident was. I kind of made it deliberately that there was not only an NPC the group had been interacting with, but Ashakel, a former party member, died in that incident. Then there's Sethos. Now, nobody's seen him in a while. Sethos is a Burun, and obviously you don't know how this works yet because I haven't done this video yet, but the Burun have two names, kind of, but you have to earn the second name. You have to do something to be seen as worthy in the eyes of Burun society to earn your second name. So it would be like Kinslichtach, or something like that, is a good example of a Burun who's earned his second name. It's name, comma, or, excuse me, comma, no, not comma. Apostrophe there, name, apostrophe, name. No space, that's how it's done. So just being Sethos Obviously, he has not earned his place in society, but he's still young. You know, he's still working on that. And he's a white mage who was invited to do something about the Moorsmen in the south trying to push for free rights or something like that. And that plot thread hasn't really been followed through by either party in a while. But let's just say Sethos is still active and still in the Show Empire, doing his own thing. Then we have Caladrius, whom was a Lord Elf of Sunsorrow, Caladrius of Sunsorrow. They stopped being active somewhat more recently and kind of became NPC'd and then slowly just kind of phased out to the point where they moved on. Caladrius has, in fact, moved on. He's currently working with the Olthoi and the Order, trying to mend the fences between the two and failing miserably, but he's doing some good stuff. Then we had a mite who you've probably heard of if you've been following the live campaign, called Araiguna, or Araguna, depending on who you may be asking. Araguna, or Araiguna, again, was referred to as the not mite because he was a mite who didn't act like one at all, and was kind of shunned by other mites as a result, and had some trouble making friends as a result of this. He was a bit mischievous, a bit of a thief, a bit of a layabout, you know, that kind of a thing. And so he's dead. Well, no, that's not really fair. He's worse than dead. Because the party encountered him on Erlenth Lacelle, and he was alive and well, and hey guys, what's up? And, see, what happened is the last time they'd seen him, he leapt into a pool of concentrated magic, which had an unintended side effect of teleporting him towards the nearest point of least resistance, which happened to be where the air ley line was, which happened to be Erlenth Lacelle, which was completely overrun with shadows. So, like I said, fate worse than death. But his appearance and interactions with Fear Nasil and Z and Snark and Guido added some wonderful flavor to that particular section of the campaign. So at least his death, or worse than death, was to good effect. There is a Sclavi named Wiskor of Ekonov. Now this is an ex-military sergeant general kind of a person. The Sclavi in general tend to make up the more brute force arm of the Show Empire. Military, workers, you know, hard labor, that kind of a thing. They're very good at basically whatever they want to be. To express this in stat terms, a Sclavi basically gets +1 to each attribute. So pretty nice. Wiskor hasn't been seen ever since he left the group because he felt the group was just not for him, and he wandered off. We're really not sure where he ended up, but suffice it to say I know exactly where he is, and it's actually really, really likely that at some point in time one of the parties is going to be interacting with him in the future because, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say it's very likely. Then we had a lycanthrope named Raver. Now, Raver was Raver's an oddity because he was constructed by an insane Dericost, who had this big idea of making lycanthropes that could reproduce, which wasn't actually possible by their understanding of magic and science, because lycanthropes are effectively golems. They're just really, really, really well-built golems with full sentient sapiens, etc. So he tried to build this one lycanthrope who was, you know, this will be the first lycanthrope that can have children. It didn't work at all, and Raver was kind of improperly designed as a result of this, so had some instability issues. He was given the mission of his master to go out and free the lycanthropes. That was his big goal. And, you know, a very noble goal, very noble ideal. Difficult to enforce, but possible. And he went out and had a few interesting adventures and finally ended up leaving the party because he said, you know, I have to go and help save my brethren. And most of the party said, yeah, no, you're crazy. And it is understandable why they said that. You know, this is someone who's trying to say, I must go and free the chairs we sit on. At least by the way that most people think of it, because lycanthropes are just, they're a thing with the Dericost, and it's not like they act like they're particularly enslaved when most people see them. So the idea of the lycanthropes being enslaved is something most people would generally disagree with on surface. So Raver left and has not been seen since. He is still out there, though. That leaves us with two more characters I want to run down. These are still people who have left the party since then. I have notes right here, which is why we've got the monitor on. Tabrin. Now, this is an important one. Tabrin of the House of Vasmora. Now, Tabrin is also a lycanthrope. And he is a very loyal, very well-placed... Well, he's very young. He's only a few years old, but has already been assigned to someplace outside of Weizhou, and obviously you don't know what that means, most likely, but basically to be assigned outside of Derricast lands is a huge deal. So the fact that he has been able to ascend to those heights so quickly says a lot for how well respected he is amongst House Vasmora. I'm going to point this out because most people tend to miss this connection. Vasmora is a name that has been name-dropped in the main campaign as one of the houses that was loyal to Gerlin. So, House Vasmora has actually approached Snarg in the live campaign, but we'll talk about that in another session. Suffice it to say, Tabrin is a very loyal follower of House Vasmora and has been busily doing their good work across the continent. And will what? Yes, he is. So then we have the last one I want to talk about, because this is the most unique one, and I know how this is probably going to tie into the story, I just don't know when it's going to happen. There was a fairy. Now, the fairies, I haven't described the fairies too much unless you've heard me describe it elsewise, but suffice it to say, they're not like most typical fairies. They are birthed, fully formed, and full adulthood, but lacking... They have basic knowledge, but they lack experience or understanding. They have sapience and sentience, but they are effectively children, right? It's just they understand language and words and beeping. And so, and they have wings, of course, which they can learn to fly around on. Just barely. They can't, but they can hover and float around, that kind of a thing. And they do distinctly have genders, male and female, even though they lack the ability to reproduce. I mention this because Hanuel was a fairy of uncertain gender. They made a point of never disclosing what their gender was because they were intending to be a gender-neutral character, which I was totally okay with. And I just mention all this because this is not intended to be a fairy joke, because, oh, they're a fairy. That's not the point, okay? Hanuel was a summoner, a green mage, and a very damned good one. And they had gotten the attention of a few people in significant places of power. In fact, it is a direct result of Hanuel's spatial trial that led the 11 to actually interact with the party for the first time. So Hanuel has had some pretty big impacts overall, and again, kind of left the party after they reached Holtberg and is off kind of doing their own thing as of now, in ways that will probably re-interact with the party when the party finally decides to go after the spoilery. So, moving along, let's talk about the forum campaign members who are still in the campaign. Now, I actually asked each of them if they would please to write up a little bit of a write-up of what they'd like to be shared with the viewers, discussing their characters and whatnot. And so I'm just going to pull up my list here. I got a list right over here of what they've written down. I might be paring out some of this, inspired partially by the Titan's Grave series, which I am still super envious of because he has a massive editing and special effects team that I lack. We're going to be having a section also where we talk about secrets, things that I know as the GM, and the players know, obviously, because it's their characters, and now the viewers know, but that the characters themselves have kept hidden from the rest of the party. Keeping in mind, these people have been grouping together for about 2.5 months now, which may not sound like a long time, and it kind of isn't, but that's a very busy 2.5 months, so the fact that they still have secrets amongst each other is probably significant. So let's talk about Zeiss. He introduces himself now as Zeiss of Dreamkeeper, originally born under the clan name of Wintersong. He has decided to change his clan name and invent his own clan name, for reasons that I won't bore you with here, but suffice it to say he's trying to effect change on a massive scale, and he felt it was a significant enough personal event to warrant such a thing, and he and I talked about this, and I agreed. At different points in his life, he has been a thief, an assassin, and an adventurer. He is currently the leader of The Exchange, a criminal organization which was born following the Undermarket's collapse. Some people would qualify Zeiss as a perceptive, foolhardy, and stubborn elf, who seems to excel at nothing else besides making enemies. However, those people wouldn't know that he was once a kind and timid boy who had no actual ambition of his own. Very little is known about Zeiss's past. Of course, I know a decent amount about it, but if he doesn't want to share it, then I'm not sharing it with you. When asked about his past, he only gives a few details about how the illegal acquisitions he made during his time as a thief pissed off a certain member of the Bloodied Flock, the legalized assassins I've mentioned before, who decided to track him and his friends down to force them to pay back what they stole. His 10 years career as an assassin wasn't a choice made entirely of his own volition. Being one of the youngest members to ever join the flock, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to presume that he wouldn't survive in such an unforgiving workplace, and yet he somehow managed both to pay his debt in full and assure the safety of the flock's assassins. Today, of course, Zeiss has directed all of his efforts into building up the exchange. But for what objective? Well, he hasn't told anyone. Dun dun dun! We'll cover his secrets in a bit. We're going to do the secrets last, so anybody who doesn't want to hear them can skip it, and so that players who don't want to hear other players' secrets can skip those as well. Let's talk about Javan. Javan is a fairy. He goes by the name of Javan Asher, which makes him a freak because he has 2 first names. And this has actually been commented on several times that people think he is very, very odd for having 2 first names. For those who don't know, fairies do not have clan names. Kind of obvious given the way that they are birthed, as I mentioned earlier. He is 2 years old. That's not uncommon, like I said, fully birthed as adults. He is of the air affinity, and he has a propensity for getting himself and the party in trouble from time to time. He also has a screw it kind of a mentality, which kind of leads to that directly. He is physically and mentally an adult, as I've already mentioned, because all fairies are. He has an incredible lack of real-world experience, and he has a tremendous infatuation with the dragoons and the very concept of dragoons. In fact, he is hoping to become one himself. He's always heard about the ancient stories of, the Dragonkin Sworn, and how they were one of the first mercenary orders, and they were awesome, and they went zooming through the air, and it was also awesome. He has a very naturally flighty nature, and that, combined with the previous things, were mainly responsible for his escape from the Academy. Nick, that's a hard word to say. Nick, you gotta pause there. Before completing his basic training merely a year after his birth. As an aside, merely being accepted to Nick Academy is actually considered a huge honor, and the fact that Javan was willing to skip out on that just kind of says something there. So this particular horrendous shift in his life served as a compass during his transition from an everyday fairy into the spear-wielding adventurer that met the party on their first mission together in Al Irat. His physical appearance, well, I was hoping to give you guys some pictures here, but I don't have pictures for everyone, especially Javan, who is kind of an unusual thing, so I hope you'll deal with me here. As I mentioned earlier, Zeiss is an elf. Actually, I do have one picture. I really want to share this picture of Javan really quick, or not Javan, Zeiss, because he actually had a guy commissioned to draw this. So, you're right, I did. Who wanted to draw this, and so this is actually, whoa, that's a big image. Wow, there we go. Okay, this is what Zeiss looks like, and you can see he kind of looks horrible. There, but custom drawing of Zeiss, and I wanted to share that because it's a pretty nice drawing. So that's Zeiss. I don't have a picture of Javan because he doesn't look like anything normal right now. During the course of the events, which I'll be covering in the future, Javan kind of started being half weird, half fairy. There are literally slices of crystal, blue-white crystal, that are sticking out of his skin at various points and along his jaw like this, in particular points, kind of accenting his features. And he, to anyone who can see anything elemental, he literally looks like an elemental. He looks like a walking elemental who just happens to be kind of unusual. Some people have gotten around this by literally pretending that he is their aspect, and the other person is just their summoner. So, he's got some unusual things going on with his appearance, and that's why I don't have a picture here. Sorry, guys. He does have a scarf with him, which he wears at all times. It is a white scarf, which has literally merged with his being as a result of the aforementioned crystalline thing. The scarf itself also has crystals going throughout it now. After the shock of seeing the crater and the explosion and blah blah blah, something no fairy... okay, his sentence structure is kind of unusual here, so forgive me. The shock of seeing the crater and the total destruction of the elements and the clear implication that nothing survived that destructive force, Javan found himself inside a crystalline cocoon, basically had lost his mind and pushed in there. And when he came out, that's when the crystals had started to manifest. His scarf had merged into him, and he has no problem flowing despite the absence of... The scarf has no problem flowing despite the absence of wind. He can also fly easier than most fairies can at this point in time. While the fairy himself does not talk about this much and decides to ignore it, he's conscious about his new status as some kind of elemental something, and he's afraid of dealing with it, and the people outside the party constantly reminding of it is not helping things. His role in the party is usually that of a frontline combatant, something he feels very at home for doing, especially after receiving his blessing of air and entering the ranks of a dragoon. He is also a specialist in elemental knowledge due to the elemental vision that comes natural to all fairies and his own personal interest in the subject, although it has rarely come into play. Sorry, Javan. Someday he hopes to be part of something bigger than his small self. Something he can call home, but he's also aware that he has a lot to deal with before that. In fact, his latest attempt to deal with things made him try his hand at creating a mercenary group, the White Scarves. Those of you following the campaign may have seen them already mentioned at the Danby's tournament a few sessions ago. However, only as he was trying to transform it into a kind of police outside of the military by brute forcing it in order to get the expected results. I mean, because why not, right? He was tired of watching the world burn around him and do nothing about it. Maybe his scarf told him to do it. We may never know his real reasons, but rest assured, he's still going to create trouble for those around him as long as he lives. May the elements have mercy on their souls. And he's still waiting to see the consequences of his meddling, which is why he puts it that way. No secrets for Javan. His secret is that he's a freak. Actually, he does have a secret, but the fact that he didn't mention it means I will also not be mentioning it. I know what it is, of course. Then we have Rory. Before we talk about Rory, let's talk about Kazrinthka of Worker, because I totally skipped her. Kazrinthka was one of the original party members and has been NPC'd and is still active, very active, actually. She is a Ulthoi woman. You might be like, wait a minute, an Ulthoi woman? Is she a breeder? I do have a picture of her. I have no idea where it is. The Ulthoi can have mental and emotional genders, even if they don't have physical genders. They identify as one or the other. So she identifies as a woman. She can't actually have children. She is a reasonably young, fairly enthusiastic, fairly kind of an Ulthoi who went through some pretty traumatizing thing for an Ulthoi to go through, including violence, which no Ulthoi really likes, and was then killed. But then she woke up one day because it was okay. She's still not 100% sure what happened. In fact, nobody is, to my knowledge. None of the viewers or the players have ever figured out the exact events that happened. But she woke up and found herself back in Central, which is where the Ulthoi are.
No, she went home. She woke up at a hospital.
Yeah, right on the border of Central.
It was like a 2-day walk.
Either way, she ended up back in Central. And when she was there, she quickly, it was like, I am here to work. And then through a series of events I'm not going to recount, she ended up on the Spurka, a.k.a. the Skyclaw, the psionic airship. And thanks to her unique disposition, she was uniquely positioned to be the scanner monitor for that ship. Because, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but let's put it to you this way. She has already been exposed to something, and she survived the encounter, so she was deemed to be safe enough to risk further exposure to that something. And being a scanner, because of the way scanning works in this setting, because it's a magical thing, not a technological thing, means that you can be exposed to something you're viewing. So you can be corrupted by it, or influenced by it, or affected by it, or whatever, right? So they needed someone who was relatively immune to run the scanners on the Spurka, and then off they went. And she's still there, running the scanner and having a generally awesome life and enjoying her things. She really, really, really likes tea, and she is fond of glomping people. Keep in mind that this is a 7-foot-tall insect with multiple arms that have razor-sharp claws at the end of them. Apparently she's 7.5 feet. I've been informed by my secret that there's something on my shoulder here. She's invisible, and she just tells me things. So that's Kazrinthka. She's actually a pretty awesome character, relatively well beloved by the party, and apparently got her bag back. I don't know if that's like getting her groove back. Yeah.
But she doesn't have soul back yet, because soul was with Z's elemental.
Either way, she is still actively on the Spurka, running as their scanning officer, and generally enjoying it because she gets to look at all sorts of cool things up there. And of course, they're constantly heading to new areas because the Spurka right now is trying to give refugee support, medical, food, etc., aid to everywhere that is affected by the war, regardless of side. So she gets to sample a lot of new cuisines and whatnot as the new areas she goes to, and she tries really hard not to look at the horrible things happening around her. Because sometimes the Spurka has to land pretty close to the front lines. And that's a psionic airship whose scanners have a pretty far range. Moving on. So, now let's get to Rory. Rory actually kicked Kazrinthka once when she was down. It's the first thing we're going to start with. He likes to go after secretaries, too. We're not sure what's up with that. And receptionist. Rory... I'm going to try this. He used to have his last name of Valen, but then he decided to change it to Osland? Eilsund? Eilsund? God, I have no idea how he wants this pronounced. Eilsund? I'm going to go with Eilsund. Rory Eilsund. He is a 24-year-old human. Now, he's from Visay-en-Lascelles.
He didn't have a last name. He lied.
So obviously, he... Obviously, he's a human, and therefore he's from Visay-en-Lascelles, because we haven't really seen a lot of humans from Aphis-Lascelles, and there's no real other options. There's no other humans anywhere else. He is... okay, I'll just go over his list here. He's a barbarian, a reformed tribal, the current exchange master of arms, and the self-appointed guardian of humanity. Before the campaign began, during the panic inherent in the impending doom that Visay-en-Lascelles that was happening in the Visay-en-Lascelles, which was later resolved, a group of bandits had seized a ship and blundered into a coastal village completely by mistake. In the resulting scuffle, a tribal known by the others as Rory went mad with rage. This was the first time he activated his barbarian rage. But was subdued and taken captive. The ship was caught in the storm on the way to Dareth, and Rory washed up on the Hebian Peninsula, which is a massive region I've mentioned before. He ended up taking a job at the docks to earn a living, joined some underground fighting rings, and found a way to train and earn money, with a few aspirations of joining the Adventurers Guild, which he wasn't aware of at first was floundering. After he did successfully join the guild, he was a few grunt jobs away from the big one, the big, huge payoff job, which was paying several thousand gold in order to get the party together. That was the one in Al-Irat. Now, for most of his life, Rory lived peacefully in the Relamath, a coastal village home to the isolationist tribe native, it's in the northwest area, of Visay-en-Lascelles. He would sometimes make trips to the city to trade or otherwise obtain things the village relied on to thrive. Although such visits were short, he often had a little time to experience the culture. This was mostly of House Leilu, if you heard my lore talk about that, which went live last week or this week, depending on how this lines up. He was the third oldest of a fairly large family of warriors. His mother showed him how to hunt, which he took to with a pastime under the right conditions, and among his siblings he was the most reluctant at being taught how to fight, to the point of being belligerent. At the time of his arrival on the mainland, Rory became very disgruntled and embittered by his lot in life. He had appreciated and acquired a taste of beer, of all things, and ever since he's appreciated the taste of other various alcoholic beverages, in addition to, albeit less frequently, wanton drunkenness. He is actually currently going through some problems with that. Since before anyone can remember, the people of the village worked in tandem to keep its location secret. In addition, a nearby city helped ensure they never had trouble with bandits. When they did, it was often a manageable group, and they were able to suppress without much difficulty. Keep in mind, this is Visay-en-Lascelles, where killing is a complete taboo. So, if you're not willing to kill and you're well organized, it's pretty easy to be able to defend against a bandit group. You just have to be ready for it. Now, the event of the bandits blundering over and discovering their home by happenstance caused a surge of panic and uncertainty because these people had no idea how to deal with these invaders since the other city had been dealing with them for the most part. And in the heat of the moment, fighting and capturing them was all they had for a short-term solution. Rory's bout of rage in the middle of the chaos was a moment of realization and self-discovery, and was the cause for him later becoming much more adaptive to the rather hardships that the people to the hardships on the mainland that the people on the Lascelles were shielded from, thanks to their idyllic lifestyle. His favorite food is red meat. His favorite drink is beer. And that reminds me, Zeiss shared his favorite food too, which is a fruit bowl or something. He linked it like totally separate, and I totally missed it. This is the most professional thing I've ever done. This video right here. Where did you link? There it is. There it is. Nope, that's not it. That's his avatar picture, which I already shared with you. Here it is. Apparently, his favorite food is, drumroll please, fruit salad. Really, Zeiss? Okay, whatever. I'm not here to judge. So now let's talk about... Oh, one last thing Rory wants to share. He has 3 major long-term goals. Goal number 1, the freedom and survival of humanity. Okay, nobody understands why this is funny, and I'm sorry. I literally couldn't contain it because his second goal is the utter destruction of the Vyotians. You see why that's funny? You see why that's funny? The third goal is to foil the Pinnacle's plans. 3 very admirable goals, and we hope Rory will be successful in them.
You know what would be really funny?
What?
If the Pinnacle's goals
Yeah.
lined up with, you know,
So if the Pinnacle
survival of
wants
humanity.
the survival of humanity and to destroy the Vyotians, so all 3 of those goals are contradictory.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be greatly ironic.
Next character. Coulson Wezray. I have no idea how to pronounce that.
Bizarre.
What?
Wezzar.
Wezrae.
There's an E on it?
Yeah.
I don't have it in my phone right.
He was 24 when the story began. We'll celebrate his 25th birthday on September 17th, assuming he lives that long. And I know he says that with a wink, but in all honesty, he is in very serious danger right now. I've already had to roll once to see if he was going to be killed in the middle of a meeting with the Lord of Glendon Wood. He was born in Holtburg, Alluvia, to his parents Grayson of Whitemoon and Lucia of Meadowlark. He has 1 younger sister, Tia, of Whitemoon. Professor of ancient civilizations at Holtburg University. Tia is married to an airship pilot, Yulwe of Riversong, and they have 1 daughter together, the 5-year-old Iridonia, or Iri, as everyone calls her. They haven't really had a chance to meet Yulwe in game yet, but he does supply runs for Ayenda of Floralwind's army because that's the first name I pointed to just now. I'm just reading word for word what he just said. From a young age, Coulson split his time between traveling with his father and living at home with his mother. Grayson was the procurement agent for his father's import-export business and would be required to travel around the continent, making contacts and finding the best deals on whatever their clients needed. He was pretty good at the job, but the real reason he took it was so he could scratch his amateur archaeology itch on someone else's dime. Coulson's mother, on the other hand, worked as an editor for one of the smaller publishing houses, although because of their size and limited manpower, she often ended up temporarily doing other jobs as well. This didn't leave her much time for travel, so she rarely joined the rest of the family on their various adventures across Dareth. It was hard for them, being separated so much, but somehow they managed to make it work, and both Coulson and Tia have fond memories of this time. Unfortunately, Grayson's father died of a sudden heart condition, leaving Grayson to carry on with the business. Hindsight is 20/20, but Grayson probably should have found a partner to take over administration of the business while he stuck to buying and selling goods. Grayson did not do that. Instead, he felt he had to do his part of the business himself, just like his dad used to. It was a disaster. For while Grayson was an excellent negotiator, he had no head for logistics, organization, delegation, bureaucracy, politics, or paperwork. Within 2 years, the business was on the verge of bankruptcy. Somehow, some way, Grayson got it into his head that finding a way to open trade between Dareth and the Lascelles would be a good idea. Desperation is often an ugly and stupid thing, but the weird thing is Grayson was absolutely certain he had found a secret route past the barriers. No, I'm going to rewrite this. They didn't know the Lascelles existed, so that doesn't work. We're going to rewrite this just a little bit. Sorry, Coulson. We'll say that instead of trying to trade with the Lascelles, he was trying. He had believed that there were these. Because I think I've talked to Coulson about this. He believed that there were these island. No, I've got a way to make this work. I've got to make this work. He had heard rumors from sailors that there were these island kingdoms out there, like in an archipelago or something like that, and he was determined to find a way to trade with them, even though nobody could actually find them. They weren't on any charts, and all they had was vague rumors, but he believed he had found a way, to secret route to get to them. And he was so certain that he could find these hidden islands, this is perfect, that he loaded up the business's last ship and set sail for parts unknown to try and manage it. What happens next is a mystery. Except to me, because I just thought of what happened on my head, and that's going to be really wonderful. Sorry, Coulson, for rewriting it, but trust me on this one, okay? The business never recovered from the loss, and Coulson ended up selling and liquidating what holdings were left to pay off the creditors and to supplement his mother's income. As for Coulson, there was a defining period for him. He befriended Vaughn, who I've mentioned briefly before, who was sent to fetch him from school after news of his father, and required Coulson to return home. But more importantly, Coulson returned to school determined to become the best businessman he could so he could rebuild the family fortune. He modeled his academic career and business plan after his grandfather, who built the original business with money he made in the Adventurers Guild, and the rest, as they say, is history. We've got one more character to talk about. Higaide. Now, I'm going to tell you Higaide's big secret right off the bat. You ready for this? Higaide's big secret is that Higaide is not his name. I'm not going to reveal what his name is, so that is not relevant here. Higaide is a human orphan raised by a caretaker named Logan in the House of Flelu. Again, Visayan Lascelles, he's a human. He was apathetic to most things, but he liked the kindly old man, and he'd help out at the workshop like he was practically an employee. The old man retired, and his son, Petrus, took over, and in so doing revealed himself to be a foolish, incompetent scumbag who would verbally grind down his workers and cheat his customers, until one day, after a faulty product left a customer injured and Petrus was in the process of throwing an overworked coworker under the bus, not literally, of course, a switch inside Higaide's head flipped, causing him to casually get up from his chair and smash his boss's nose in with a paperweight, and then to just stand there for a few seconds with a really dumb and bored look on his face, staring down at the squirming fraction of a man groveling in shock and pain on the floor. And that's when he knew he would become Batman. Oh, sorry, I swore I wouldn't make the joke, Higaide, I'm sorry. After that, he and 5 of his friends decided to move to Redoran to make a new life for themselves. Along the way, one of them went mad and killed the other 2, which, again, this is Visayan Lascelles. You have to go completely intellectually gone to the point where you're effectively a beast to actually take a human life on this island. Leaving Higaide nearly dead himself. After recovering, he became an adventurer, partly to scour the island for revenge, to no success. However, one day during a manhunt, he met a monk named Anji, who sent his party packing, but offered to teach him some skills. With nothing better to do, Higaide decided to accept, training with him for several years until Anji kicked him back out into the world, where he kept adventuring until Visayan Lascelles went to hell in a handbasket. Remember the whole sinking, raising the island disintegrating problem? Through a series of fortuitous incidents, he managed to stow away on the very first ship bound for the mainland and met the party. Higaide's abnormal personality means he has a lot of room in that void he calls a brain for the things he actually cares about, and those two are pretty much adventuring and people. The two often conflict with one another, leaving him torn between freedom and responsibility, since you can pretty much tell him about some random dude that he's never met before suffering halfway across the globe, and he will probably care. He will probably cross the globe to try and help the guy too, if he has nothing more pressing to do, of course. But, adventure! You pretty much put those two together and he's happy. Unless people die, then he is unhappy. You take those two away from him, and it is a coin toss as to whether or not he will starve out of sheer apathy. His goals are to stop the war, to find some way to keep his mind from being scion-jacked. Again, it's actually happened like 3 times so far. And to try and share that with the rest of humanity in order to make sure that none of them can ever be brainwashed again. His favorite food is codfish, potatoes, and onion casserole. And his favorite snack is roasted peanuts or walnuts. He doesn't drink alcohol either. Tastes terrible to him. So who would like to hear some secrets of these characters? Not petting kittens. That's Zeiss's secret, obviously. We'll go down the list here. Let's talk about Zeiss's secrets, okay? So this is a spoiler warning for anybody who does not want to hear these or other circumstances, okay? Zeiss's mother was a green mage. Now, if you don't understand the significance of that, about 14 years prior to the modern era, there's an incident, which doesn't really have a proper name, where hundreds of thousands of green mages across the entire continent died, just like that. And there is actually I hate to call it a holiday, but the closest thing to a holiday that they have in memoriam of this horrible, horrible event. The party's actually already gone through this in this particular given year. Beep. Beep. Oh, God, beeping. Okay, we're good. I'm hearing things now, guys. Zeiss's mother was one of the green mages who was killed in that incident. Nobody's actually sure what happened, by the way. Nobody really knows the full details of what happened. Soon after Zeiss awakened as a green mage, this is his second secret, he made a permanent binding with Advok. Now, for those of you who don't understand what that means, it basically means this is now your one aspect forever. You don't get other aspects, you don't summon other aspects, and your aspect is made stronger, and so are you, but if anything happens to you or the aspect, the other is also weakened, so it's a give and take kind of a situation. His permanent binding with Advok, which is the name of his aspect, which is the aspect of light, that is the element he follows, was to honor the memory of his mother, who did the same thing with her own aspect, which was also of light. His third his third secret is he has a hidden long-term goal to destroy the Pinnacle, whom he believes to be responsible for killing his mother. Scroll down. Jovan does not have any secrets, as we already mentioned. Rory does not have any secrets, as we mentioned. Coulson has a couple. So we're not going to share Coulson Wezre's, or how do you pronounce that, secrets. First, Lucia, the name of his mother, she never recovered from the loss of her husband. She could still do her job, if barely, and with some help from Tia, but eventually her condition got so bad, she was confined to an asylum on the Holtberg coast. Neither Coulson nor Tia like to talk about it, and one of them periodically goes and visits her every month or so. They'd visit more often, but they find the experience extremely painful, and their mother never knows the difference anyway, so they mostly go to make sure she's being properly taken care of. Unfortunately, the recent events and the war that's broken out have kept him from being able to do so, and Coulson feels immensely guilty about this. The second secret Coulson has is he told the Lord of Glendon Wood, Farron of Silent Blade, why he doesn't use a clan name, and he gave a big old reason and speech for it, which I suppose I can actually share with you. Because why not? That's about the character, and we can share character stuff here. Why not, right? I mean, you know, just for the heck of it. You're going to have to give me a moment to pull it up, but I can totally do that. I'm telling you, most professional video ever. And I quote, "Are you wondering if I'm some kind of renegade ne'er-do-well trying to corrupt our ancient traditions? Or perhaps I have some sort of tragic past that told me to leave Wintersong behind? No, I just think that clans are an outdated concept left over from a time that doesn't exist anymore and hasn't existed for my entire life. Tradition for the sake of tradition is misguided. If one does not ask why something is, and if it is no longer any use, then you no longer ended up fomenting the state we find ourselves in today. Example, a population that isn't engaged politically because traditionally they have no say or buy-in. In their own country, an aristocracy that is traditionally more interested in petty squabbles and short-sighted power grabs than in doing their job so the country can function, and a military organized around the traditional city-state system that suffers from rivalry-based redundancies between forces and prioritizes war over the very people they were organized to defend in the first place. And that just isn't me casting blame, Lord Silent Blade, as the young are wont to do for the ills of the world. Even the limited second-hand information I have access to makes it clear that you and the other lords did everything you could under the circumstances, and anyone who doesn't acknowledge that is a fool, an extremist, or both. But this system cannot and should not last. So you could say taking the name of Wezre, the weaving sigil for wisdom in action, was my way of reform, if only on a personal scale. A drop in the bucket, but it was the best I could do when I was young." Coulson's secret is that he originally took that name during a rebellious phase when he was younger to impress a girl. He lost the girl, but he did keep the name. And is that it? That's it. That's everything. That is the characters for the Forum campaign. Now, originally I was going to tell you about their wonderful adventures and how they screwed up everything they touched. But that's going to have to wait till next session because we're already at 43 minutes and all I've been doing is talking about the characters. So I hope you have fun with this. Any questions about the characters, you may feel free to post here in comments. Not only can I answer, but I know at least several of these people who play these characters can answer for themselves if you want to ask them anything. So I'll see you at the next video, guys.